I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we're gonna do some color mixing. We're gonna bring out the grid, mix some colors, and make a lot of different purples. Some may lean very blue, some may lean very pink, and hopefully we'll get a lot of good purples in between. Before I jump in and talk more about the project, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to today's lab partner, Katie G. Katie, thank you so much for being my lab partner again for another color mixing project. I think what you created out of the green color mixing is absolutely spectacular, so I'm really excited to see what you will create with the colors we get today. Don't worry, that boiling you hear is intentional for another project I have going on. Today, we will be mixing DHarma Pink Orchid Acid Dye with either Jacquard Brilliant Blue or DHarma's Extreme Blue Acid Dye, looking at a combination of 1% depth of shade, which is 1 gram of dye per 100 grams of yarn, all the way down to a 0.625% depth of shade, which would be 0.06 grams of dye per 100 grams of yarn. In every single of these 25 containers, we will have a little bit of each color. And so we will have in between a 1-to-1 ratio down this diagonal, or a 1-to-16 ratio at either corner, where we have a lot of pink and a little blue, or a lot of blue and a little pink. And hopefully we should see a great range of colors, but there is a chance that our blue is going to be a lot more pigmented than the pink, so this could be very blue leaning, but we will see. I am not going to go through the calculations today for the number of milliliters of a 1% stock solution I need for each of our rows and columns to get the correct amount of dye. But as a reminder, a 1% stock solution has 1 gram of dye dissolved in 100 milliliters of liquid. So if I had 20 milliliters of that 1% stock solution, that would be 0.2 grams of dye, the amount I would need for a 1% depth of shade. I'm going to try to pop up these volumes on the screen when I'm doing the measurements to help. But if you want to do something like this, I recommend just taking a screenshot right now. I put on my P100 respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves, and then use my little scale to measure out 2.5 grams of dry dye powder from either Pink Orchid or Extreme Blue. Then, using hot tap water, I dissolve the dyes in 250 milliliters total volume to give us our 1% stock solutions. Okay, we have our grid, and I am going to start with the pink. Each of these 25 containers has 1 cup of warm tap water in it. And I am going to use these graduated syringes to measure out the dye. Starting with 20 milliliters of dye across the bottom. And I always use a syringe that has the volume closest to the one I need to measure. This allows me to have a little bit more precision with my measurements. Okay, next, the syringe is not very easy anymore. This is a 10 milliliter syringe. You can probably find some of these on Amazon. I'll link to some below, but some of them used to come from infant medicine things, which obviously all of the tools and equipment and all these containers I use are dedicated for dyeing yarn and are not ever used for the preparation of food. But I've also sometimes found some like large turkey baster syringes at like Dollar Tree and things like that. Now, since it is winter, that is the main reason why I'm starting with warm water. I don't entirely mind if we end up seeing some color breaking. I'm doing 5 milliliters now. Color breaking would be where we see the pink and blue pigments we are using bind at different rates. Now, I don't think either of these two colors are technically primaries, which means that they probably have more than one pigment mixed in them to begin with. And so therefore, I don't think either of them break on their own. That is something that I would probably remember as I do 2.5 milliliters now. I would probably remember if either of them broke on their own, but I certainly know that there is a chance that combined we might see some breaking. Although I'm now not sure if I've seen breaking with Pink Orchid yet. I also really want to mix Pink Orchid with black. I think that that would be really beautiful. Now, if you're paying attention to my numbers, you'll notice that each row has half of the dye as the previous one. And one big reason for doing that is it allows us to see the biggest kind of difference between the colors. If we were doing, say we called one 100% and then we did 90, 80, 70, 60%, there would be differences. It would just be extremely subtle. So, and I know that with the two colors I'm using, we should have a good range here. And so we just did 1.25 milliliters there. And now I need to go rinse out all of these syringes. My boiling project is almost done, I promise. But now we are going to do the columns, starting with our most concentrated blue here, going to the least concentrated. And once again, we are starting with 20 milliliters. I started with the pink because I thought that you might be able to see a bit of our pink gradient across on the countertop. So it's often hard to see the differences between these colors until we add the yarn. But the nice thing about doing color mixing like this is that when you want to create your own custom color mixtures, this can be extremely helpful for knowing what colors you want to mix. And I have referred back to these color mixing videos I've done many, many times to help me pick my colors. The only problem with extreme blue is that it is so pigmented, it can be hard to see the measurements on the syringe. It's a little bit easier when the dye stock is less concentrated. Another choice when you're doing something like this is to use a less pigmented dye stock. So I am doing a 1% stock solution here, but it would be easier to see if I had, say, a 1/4% stock solution, where I had 1 gram of dye dissolved in 400 milliliters of water. And then I would just need to measure out a larger volume each time, which also is in general easier to measure out larger volumes, and it's easier to be more precise than it is once you get close to a milliliter or so. But I really like these graduated syringes, and they work fairly well for me. That one looks like it could be purple. Otherwise, this is likely going to be very, very blue. Oh my goodness. But you never know until we start stirring things up. Purple is absolutely my favorite color. And one, I guess, risk from this combination here today is that I know it's a very powerful blue, and then we've got a fairly powerful pink here as well. But since I haven't done color mixing with these particular ones before, that makes it harder for me to know how they would mix. Whereas if I was using, for example, like a fluorescent fuchsia and brilliant blue, which I have used before, then I might know and could adjust the ratios of the two, maybe using more pink or a little less blue, so I know I could get purples in the middle. But I kind of wanted to see what would happen here. And so I think we may have some purples, but let me get ready to start mixing these up. All right, now we are going to stir, and in each case, I am going to start with, I guess, similar amounts of blue, because I'll go down the columns. But as we move on, we are increasing the amount of pink. I would not use the same spoon without wiping it in any kind of way to go the opposite direction, because that would introduce more pink and shift the color more. But a tiny amount of pink with the same amount of blue, that's not going to change the color here, etc. on the way down. But things are, I mean, I'm starting to see some, that could be purple there. That one looks purpley to me. But again, it's hard to know for sure. Did I use extreme blue over a pink color in Hanukkah? I think I maybe picked a different blue, but I don't remember. I think I used a bright blue, but I will have to go back and check at editing what colors I used in Hanukkah night 3 from 2021. And goodness, have I even talked about the yarn that I'm using for this video yet? The yarn is pre-soaked for a couple of hours at this point, but it is Crazy 8 DK from Wool to Die For, 100% superwash merino. I've used that base in a number of different color mixing videos, and it is beautiful, beautiful for sure. So I'm very curious with how these like blues over here are going to look. I know that if I was using, say, a more turquoise color, that we would have, it would become more blue, but this is already like a bright sort of true blue. So I don't know, I'm very curious. I have no idea if any of these containers are still warm. We did start with hot tap water, but oh, that is very, very blue. That is not looking very, very purple to me at all. Starting at our 2%. And of course this diagonal where I am starting out is just all 1-to-1 ratio of the two colors. And so I think that that means everything this way is going to be extremely blue, but that is all right. Just the main difference between each of these is the relative depth of shade. That blue down there is a lot more pigmented than this blue right here. But, ooh, that's a beautiful like berry pink. And I'm totally dripping water. I did squeeze out some of the pre-soak, but I'm very, very curious. It's possible in some of the rows or columns we may see a sharp jump as we start to mix, but we may not, because since there's a little bit of pink in every single container, that might mean that, you know, we, the differences when you go across a row or down a column are going to be pretty subtle. But when I divide this into sets, it is definitely going to be based on what I think makes like a really nice combination. Because for example, if all of these blues right here look extraordinarily similar, then that may not be as exciting of a set. But I am very curious, and I'm happy that we do have some colors here that I call purple. But I mean, I probably could have adjusted it so we were using less blue so we could have more purples here overall. But sometimes it's fun to just start and see where we end up, because also some of these blues, ooh, that is beautiful, that are a bit more maybe indigo leaning versus violet are also exciting. And so having a good recipe for that is handy. For sure. And, you know, we'll see different depths of shade of the blues, and so I think it'll be really, really lovely. That bottom row with a lot of pink in it is really, really beautiful. Really beautiful. Oh, Katie, I hope that you will be excited. All right, I'm gonna definitely need, how warm are these? They're maybe approaching room temperature. They're certainly not cold. I think I started to say at one point that a reason why I was starting with warm water was just to make sure things are nicely dissolved. Mainly because it is winter, I'm not going to be setting these outside. They will be inside at room temperature, and room temperature can be pretty cold in the winter. Ooh. These purples over here with just the littlest amount of blue and increasing amounts of pink are really, really pretty. Like, this is a gorgeous, gorgeous set. But I have a feeling that once we go past the second row, they are going to be a lot more blue heavy leaning. So I may end up liking some of the rows a bit better, but it's really, really hard to say for sure. And there's no acid in any of these yet, mainly because since when I add the yarn, you can see there's part of it sticking out. I don't mind if we get, ooh, that's a beautiful purple. Ooh, that's a very me purple right there. I don't mind, again, if we see color breaking, but I would like there to be a chance at some more semi-solid color. If I wanted the colors to be more solid and a little more even, I would want to have more water present. With only 1 cup of water, that's not a ton for this. Ooh, this is a beautiful, maybe this is kind of indigo right there, or maybe iris, like an iris blue that is like very, very purpley. Because over here, these blues are gorgeous, but there is just not a lot of pink showing through. And so I think, and this is a lot because of, you know, where we have more pink and that's where we see more purple. I think a lot of these rows are a bit more dramatic than the columns. Like these, I'm very curious to see what this will look like dry, because right here it's looking very similar. But oh, that's beautiful. I just looked at the pullback on the monitor, and that is really, really lovely. Oh, Katie, I hope you're really, really excited. Okay, and now I'm gonna add 2 teaspoons of white vinegar to each sample. This is a little more than I sometimes do, but I want to give a chance for all these colors to strike while I'm still doing the cool vat. And if you watched like my Hanukkah vlog and are curious about my wrist, nothing I've done so far today has really bothered it. Of course, I'm not going to be setting one of these up every day over the course of a week this time, but I also filled all of these containers in the sink and then moved them over to avoid some of the things that maybe caused me issues last time. Okay, I'm going to get more vinegar. And so since we are going to be inside where it's maybe 68 degrees instead of outside where it's approaching 90, it's probably going to take a couple days for these to set a bit. And now the reason why I like to do this cool vat approach, where I let the yarn and dye sit at a cooler temperature for a longer period of time, is just basically because of the total number of samples. It's easier to set them all up now and do it this way versus use 5 jars at a time on the stove and heat that way. But I absolutely can do that if things don't clear. And so right now I'm going to go ahead and just stir all these up gently again off camera in the way that you have seen me do that already. This is a gorgeous sort of periwinkle. Ooh, this could be close to like the color of the year. Maybe a tiny bit more pigmented, but those proportions are pretty good for a very peri kind of color. But anyway, I'm gonna stir the rest of these up. I've said it before, and I'll probably say it again. You do not need to have a complete collection of pre-mixed acid dyes to be able to mix a lot of colors. Even with as few as 6 colors, a black, magenta, red, blue, turquoise, and yellow, you can mix a huge range of colors just from varying the proportions. So that's something that's really, really important to keep in mind. But now I need to go get lids and put covers on all of these samples and then figure out where I'm going to set them aside. So I haven't actually put the lids on, but we're going to have them 1 to 5 all the way down. And I'll say it's about 1 p.m. on a Tuesday right now, and I can imagine that it probably won't be until the end of the week when I deal with these, but I will try to keep some of these more pigmented ones on top so that way I can check on it and see when the colors have absorbed. But I'll see you in a couple days. Now we happen to have some extra dye from this project, both in our pink color, as I'm starting to rinse this out, and in our blue color. And I think that what I want to do is save the dyes, but obviously I'm going to be rinsing out all of these containers more at a non-specified stock solution, and then use these colors for some kind of project later on when I have like stove space and things like that. So I'll be rinsing all of the pink tools into the pink jar and all the blue into the blue off camera. It is now Saturday at about 10:30 a.m. and so future Rebecca will let you know how long it's been. But I will say I did check sample 25, which has the 1% depth of shade of the pink plus the extreme blue, and ooh, this color is amazing and vibrant. So vibrant, oh my goodness. But I will say the water is clear with maybe the lightest tint of blue, and that was the case even after about 24 hours. But I didn't have time yet to get ready to steam all these. So I'm gonna remove these lids, and now we get a better sense of what our colors are because the color has absorbed into the yarn. I would say it's still hard to determine the differences we see in this column with our 1% blue. I mean, absolutely, when we have less pink versus more pink, these are different colors. Definitely different colors, but there's a subtlety to it. And so I don't know, and the steamer basket is nice and hot, I don't know yet if it's going to make sense to group them into sets by columns, where we have a single blue depth of shade and varying the pink, or rows, where we have the same pink but vary the blue. I think that it may make more sense to do rows, but some of my favorite sets would be this column here, going from this magenta all the way to this pastel blue. This row here, the magenta to the deep blue, and then I love this row up here as well, where the pink doesn't make a huge difference. I don't know. There are a lot of different ways that you could group this. I mean, even the diagonal is gorgeous. So we'll see when they're dry, because some of the differences, maybe this column is going to be more dramatic than I thought, and so then maybe it'll make sense. But it also might be a little subtle for me. So now we need to get ready to group these minis to start heat setting them. And I am going to show, and I'll show all the empty containers once we are ready. But actually I'm realizing I'm starting to pull these out. Oh, there's a tiny bit of pink in that. Ooh, we've got some pink here. Okay, that's good to know, but we didn't have pink down there. So, interesting. I do think I want to group these by row, mainly because that is, right now, since the blue sort of dominates, it is easier to see the differences. I will say this one is more purple than I thought it was going to be. So there may be some nice surprises, but I will show all these once they're empty. But I am going to go in rows, group them, add a removable nylon zip tie, and we are going to steam set each of them for 30 minutes. And here's what we're left with. In some we have a little bit of color on the lip because that wasn't mixed in. I am perplexed why we still have a tiny bit of color in those 2 cups and not across the whole row. This is something I've seen before, and I am not quite sure what causes it. But again, I have everything steaming in a steamer basket on the stovetop for 30 minutes, and I'm gonna go rinse out all of these cups. And then once the yarn is cool, we will get ready to wash it. Let's wash our yarn. There was a little bit of dye left in the cup, but I am optimistic that as I add some dish soap to our cool water, that our cool yarn will see no bleeding. That is fantastic. I'm gonna go ahead and wash the rest off camera, but obviously I'd pop back in if we see anything coming out. The water I'm washing in is cold, but it is winter in Massachusetts, so it's actually got a little bit of warmth in there because cold water is very, very cold. But anyway, I'm gonna rinse out the soap, put the yarn through my spin dryer, and hang it up to dry. But let's take one more little look, and we are golden. Katie G, we have our colors. I am so excited to see our grid. And don't worry, I will pop up all of the depth of shade labels once I have our grid laid out, because I think that that is such a helpful way to think about mixing colors. But now I'm gonna go pop on a podcast, use my skein twister, and twist up all of these minis. I'm gonna spread this out more in a moment, but it looks so cool that I wanted to show it now. And Katie, I know we talked about a lot of different color options, and one suggestion you had was a pale pink and like an extreme blue. Pink Orchid is not a pale pink, but in comparison to our extreme blue, you really, really only feel it in this little area right here. Maybe this one as well. But the blue absolutely is dominating it. Like, I don't feel the pink in this top row at all. And we really, in the second row, only see it in this palest shade. But let me spread everything out a little bit. Okay, here we have it. And maybe my rows aren't the straightest, but that is okay. Man, I love extreme blue. But when they were wet, I was still not sure the best way to incorporate them into sets. And I would say as far as sets go, I think the columns, these 3 columns are amazing. I really like this one. These 3, the difference is subtle, but with this, it's just getting subtly more and more purple. The problem is these last 2 columns feel very, very subtle. I would say our 1% of pink plus 1% of extreme blue looks different from the rest. And same with the 1% blue plus 0.5% pink. That feels very different. These 4 look very similar, and same with these 3. Like the impact of the pink is so much less present that as a fade set, it's not quite as exciting. And so you get more difference as you change the amount of blue than when you change the amount of pink. Now, you could absolutely play around and mix these up and do sets that aren't rows and columns. But when you're talking about 25 mini skeins and you want to create a set of 10 or 5 sets of 5 really, then you do need to take that into consideration. And so I think it makes the most sense to go with rows. And over here, like the difference here is a little bit more extreme. It doesn't feel out of place, but it is a little bit surprising to see more purple at the end than a blue. But I think that it still works as a set. Here is just the column from the far right that has the 1% depth of shade of extreme blue. And I think that you can see something here. There is something still beautiful and really, really subtle that could be wonderful. I just think that when you're trying to pick a fade set, you want to have, even if it's subtle, you want to feel more of a change. Otherwise, why would you have a set of mini skeins versus just a single color? And so that's just my personal opinion. Of course, I absolutely love the like move around the outside edge and maybe even add that one blue there as a set of 10. Ooh, I mean, that's fun. But the problem is that then I just end up again with a bunch of blues that feel very similar because I'm like, ooh, that set's cool. And like this set here, how many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That is also cool. But then you end up with all these colors right here that just feel really, really, really similar. So not quite, not quite. So I have decided on what I want my sets to be. That we know. But now it's a question of what sets do I send to my lab partner, Katie? Because I want to make a beautiful set of 10. And I believe that last time I did an equivalent of that set and this set, which would work really, really well. But I think this time I could still go for this set right here without too much of an issue. There are a lot of similarities between these two sets, but I feel like the step difference between having 1% depth of shade of pink total versus 0.25% depth of shade of the pink is really, really dramatic. Like, this feels significantly lighter than that one. And so I feel like there's enough difference between all of these colors. So if I were to take it and then flip it, and we were gonna go like this is a logical progression. We're starting with pink and ending with pink. You could do something beautiful that way because these colors here feel sufficiently different. Similarly, you could do something like this as well. Maybe not quite. Like the step here is very, very dramatic. I am very, very surprised how quickly that pink drops off. And I believe I'm forgetting. I think I shared in the video earlier a picture of what Katie made last time with our green mixtures. And I think that however these are mixed together and blended together, it would work really, really well. So anyway, Katie G, thank you so much for being my lab partner. I love doing these color mixing projects and I really appreciate a nudge to play with more of it. If you would like to learn more about how you can become a lab partner like Katie, go and check out the listing in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. Katie, once again, thank you so, so much for being my lab partner. Now that we know where we ended up here today, it could be really, really fun. And maybe it would mean me going back to primaries, but attempting a grid mixture where things feel more purple overall than they feel blue. And so whether that means taking this extreme blue and having the deepest color be 0.25% depth of shade, that is a choice. And that could bring us a bit more balance and seeing a lot more of the pinks showing through overall. Or maybe another choice is, in addition to making the blue less potent overall, is to change some of the steps with the pink. Because we can see even with a tiny amount of blue, the pink falls out pretty quickly. So maybe having each one be, maybe we need to do 75% of the pink each step down. And maybe that would make more of a difference. I don't know. All I know is that I am excited to do more color mixing. Please leave requests and combinations. I still plan to do pink with black, and I want to do a lot of colors with navy. Oh, there's a lot that I want to do. And I find this just fun and aesthetically pleasing. And while it is a lot of effort to do this, if your goal is to end up coming up with a recipe for the perfect purple based on what you have, I think that as like exploratory fun and playing around with the colors you have, it is just, I just really enjoy the process. Even though I've learned to not do one of these every day over the course of a week. And speaking of my wrist, you know, I think some of the shifts that I made, like filling up all the cups in the sink, definitely did help. Although I still felt my wrist getting a little bit tired over the course of filming this project. The main difference though is that I listened to that and gave it breaks. And so this is another reminder to always listen to your body and take care of yourself. But yeah, there's definitely more color mixing that I want to do going forward. So please make sure you're subscribed and have your notifications turned on so you never miss a new video. I post videos at least twice a week. Plus there's live streams and bonus series and all kinds of fun stuff like that. And I do try to mix up both the yarn bases that I use, and by the way, I love this Wool to Die For Crazy 8, and the techniques and dye types. I try to play around with a lot of different things and take risks sometimes. This one was less of a risk, but I like to take risks and have myself open to making mistakes so that way I learn and you can learn as well and maybe learn some things you might want to avoid based on the results I get. But this is not one to avoid. This is a good result. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you so much for watching.